This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Hey, this is Brian Peña. I always join the Vito podcast, the best podcast in the United States.
And welcome to the latest, the freshest edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito Jerome Chirco, along to my usual sidekick and partner in crime, that is the Doc from Doc and Jock, John Charles Mack O'Roon. John, happy Halloween, and how's it going?
At the time of this recording, it's Halloween. I enjoyed going to Target, picking you up a Halloween mask, and we're having some fun on this Halloween. But tonight's the night, Vito, for all baseball fans, especially locally here in Detroit. I think a large portion of Tigers fans are going to be checking in to the World Series game tonight. Game 6 is taking place Tuesday night, and guess who's on the mound? The man that the Houston Astros targeted to take them over the hump. And it's been reported now, too, that the Dodgers had a chance to get Justin Verlander, and they decided to go in a different direction. How ironic would it be that a guy that they passed on in Justin Verlander goes into their house Game 6 with all the marbles? You know, it basically is a story that writes itself in that Justin Verlander could be a hero for the Houston Astros. If I'm correct, he's undefeated with the Astros, hasn't lost yet, hasn't experienced a loss with the Houston Astros as a pitcher, and that's what they got him for. Big moments, big stage, number one pitcher. I got a good feeling he's going to bring some stuff, but my goodness, just in watching the first 5 games of the World Series, I've been so impressed, so entertained, and there's lots to talk about regarding the series.
Well, the Dodgers ended up getting Yu Darvish from the Rangers instead of Justin Verlander. Do you know what Yu Darvish did in this series so far? Diddly squat, got bombed. And then Yuli Gurriel, we know what he did, the obscene gesture towards Yu Darvish. It was bad, and he had to pay for it, but suspended next year, 5 or 6 games instead of being suspended for this World Series. And you realistically can make the argument that Yuli Gurriel should have been suspended for the rest of this fall classic instead.
Vito, I want to bring something up regarding how that whole situation played out. I feel like not enough credit is being given to Yu Darvish in terms of his reaction to it. Look, it blew up on Twitter. Everybody saw the video. In this day and age, Vito, in 2017, look, you walked in here and I'm like, look, let's take some pictures. You have to know that there's at least 600 cameras on you as a player, especially in the World Series. So for him to make that gesture really is shocking to not think that potentially you're going to get caught. But now the outrage starts to take place. People are offended. People are upset. Yu Darvish shows his human side. And he comes out and says, look, I already know that there's already a fury about this, that there's a lot of outrage. I don't want to put additional pressure on this man. He knows it was a mistake, and he took the high road, and he took the classy road. And look, Gurriel is going to face a 5-game suspension at the start of the 2018 season. You know, I'm going to ask you, should he have been suspended during the course of the actual World Series? But Yu Darvish, I just want to give him credit because that's how you handle it. That's how I would handle it. If somebody made a gesture about being Middle Eastern or being bald or something regarding my appearance and was caught nationally, I just, you know, the mantra that's really helped me deal with people in such a great way is don't take it personally. Look, potentially he might have been making fun. I don't take it personally. I would not have gotten offended. I would have done the exact same thing that Yu Darvish did. And that's a lesson in terms of not everything has to get to the level of DEFCON 5. Yu Darvish said, look, everyone has the right to judge him. He made a mistake. He obviously wouldn't do that again. And you have to also remember, people are humans. They make mistakes. Now, obviously, Gurriel is insensitive to do that, especially in a competitive nature, but the reaction that people have is good enough. I feel like once it kind of got out of hand and people were, you know, calling for him to be suspended and all that kind of stuff, I feel like what went down in terms of how Yu Darvish handled it is a perfect model of how you handle this and how you squash a controversy. Look, Yu Darvish could have then started a foundation. He could have went on a bunch of interviews and said, look, this is totally intolerable, that the entire Asian culture has been offended and this is totally unacceptable. And it could have overshadowed the entire rest of this World Series, but it didn't. Yu Darvish, very classy man, and that's, in my opinion, how you handle something like this, especially in the course of a competitive situation, the 2017 World Series.
Well, you kind of squashed the controversy right off the bat. But he could have taken it really, really personally. He didn't. And obviously he wasn't too shaken by it, but the Asian culture has a right to be deeply offended by the obscene gesture made by Yuli Gurriel.
Why?
And if you really wanted to punish Gurriel and really make a point to him and get him to think about how wrong and obscene his gesture was to Yu Darvish and to Asian culture, well, I think you should have suspended him for the remainder of the Fall Classic. That really would have made a statement, a deep and profound statement to Yuli Gurriel that is so completely unacceptable.
No.
There's no room for that in modern day culture and in baseball. Major League Baseball will not put up with that. And if you really wanted to make a point to him about that Major League Baseball will not put up with that, then you would have suspended him for the remainder of the Fall Classic. Suspending him for the first 5 games of the 2018 regular season, guess what that does to the Astros realistically and to Yuli Gurriel? Diddly squat. It doesn't even make a dent on the Astros ball club in their season in 2018. Because the first 5 games of 2018, guess what? They don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. With the long marathon that the Major League Baseball regular season truly is, 162 games in totality, it makes no dent on the Astros season by suspending him for next year. The way to really make a statement, a profound statement of the Astros and to Yuli Gurriel is by suspending him for the remainder of the Fall Classic. And that's what I believe Commissioner Rob Manfred, the Major League Baseball commissioner, should have done to Yuli Gurriel to really make a profound statement to him that what he did to Yu Darvish, that obscene gesture, was completely wrong and uncalled for.
Likely it would have an effect, but I also would go with the fine situation. Look, if you want to set precedent and you say that if anybody performs or suggests anything that's of a sensitive or racial nature, then the fine's like $250,000. And that potentially could send a message across Major League Baseball that those kind of gestures are not tolerated. And so I just think that Yu Darvish, in terms of the way he handled it, really showed himself to be a classy individual. And it also removes the distraction away from his ball club because they're embattled in a series. They're fighting for their lives at this point in time, down 2-3 in a series now, coming back home and trying to win the next 2 games in order to capture the 2017 World Series. I feel like Yu Darvish also has to potentially focus because if this goes to a Game 7, which Yasiel Puig, he came out guaranteed victory, very brazen. But if there is a Game 7, guess who is slated to start Game 7 for the Dodgers? The aforementioned Yu Darvish. So, Vito, Game 6, do you think Justin Verlander, the man that was brought in to do the job, to be the man, to be the guy that potentially an entire organization is counting on to bring home a World Series, you think he does the job?
I think JV gets it done in Game 6. No Game 7 will have to be played at Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles. Beautiful Los Angeles, California, under the bright lights. And that would be a tough situation for the Astros to win that game on the road. Astros have been great at home. Obviously, on the road, it's tougher to play. And in a Game 7 in the World Series, a great ball club like the Dodgers you're going up against in a Game 7 after losing Game 6 with Justin Verlander on the mound, the guy that you think, thought would have brought home a championship for your squad at that point in time. But yeah, I answered your question already, right? JV will definitely get it done. And I might be eating my words when this podcast is released on Wednesday, as it is Wednesday now of this week. So yeah, I might have eaten my words by now because JV maybe didn't have that grand performance, that A-quality, ace-caliber performance, but the Astros traded for him for this very purpose. It does not even matter what he does the remainder of his tenure with the Houston Astros the next 2 seasons because it's all about the postseason and the World Series at this point, baby. If he doesn't get it done, you can almost rule him as an utter failure, at least a semi-failure for the Astros because he was traded for the sole purpose to get it done in crunch time for the Astros with the chance now to win the Fall Classic in Game 6. But once again, I believe he gets it done in a very JV-esque, masterful performance where he goes 7 innings at least and allows less than 3 earned runs. That is my prediction, Doc, for JV in Game 6. How about yourself?
Man, Vito, Game 5 was outstanding. You had that game going alongside Sunday Night Football. Did you by chance see the ratings? My goodness. Game 5 on Fox outdrew the NFL by 36% 36% higher ratings on Fox than on NBC for Sunday Night Football. And that's a bigger gap than it was last year. Last year, the gap for a World Series game over Sunday Night Football was just 32%. So a lot more people definitely have tuned into the World Series. And can you blame them? Oh my goodness, Game 5 was outstanding, back and forth. I had thought once Clayton Kershaw was gifted a 4-0 lead, ball game, lock it down. But Vito, Houston definitely showed, some strong resolve, and they were able to come back, tie the game, take a lead. Then in the 7th inning, Houston makes a huge mistake in the outfield, which allows for a run, and the entire stadium is thinking, oh my goodness, we're going to lose this ball game. Houston comes back, I believe, in the bottom of the 7th inning, ties it up. The Dodgers take a lead. Then Houston takes another lead. And then all of a sudden, in the 9th inning, I'm like, please, a 3-run lead. Houston had a chance to win it in the 9th. After the Dodgers tied it, they go into extra innings. And finally, the Astros were able to take the game down in the 10th inning. So when you look at it, both teams really want to be able to take this one down. They're super competitive. Each and every ball game has a bunch of dramatics, a bunch of home runs. No lead is really safe. So Game 6 and a potential Game 7 are must watch.
Well, Game 5 was a must-watch. Back and forth, runs being scored, home runs aplenty. So if you like offense, and if you dig the long ball, no matter if you're a female or a male, then you were loving Game 5. Absolutely, Doc. And you watched the whole entire thing, huh? All 10 innings. Astros won it in 10. The Dodgers in the 9th. How about how they came back? Yasiel Puig, your man, who's always brazen, brash and full of energy, hit that home run. He stuck his bat out, and it went out of the ballpark. How about that dang home run hit by Yasiel Puig? And then, you thought Astros still are going to win it. They're down by a run, 12-11. Guess what? They tied it up. Chris Taylor stuck his bat out, just hit it up the middle. A great pitch by the Astros thrown there in that situation. You thought, it's going to be a ground out or he's in a K, Chris Taylor in that situation. But guess what? The co-NLCS MVP, Chris Taylor, who won the NLCS MVP along with Justin Turner, Chris Taylor, he squared it up, hit it up the middle. Great piece of hitting. Nobody saw that coming. The Dodgers tied it up. The Astros then win it in the 10th inning. And who gets it done for the Astros in the 10th? The youngster, Alex Bregman, who I believe is my age, 20. Well, actually, I'm 24. I think he's younger than me. I think he's 23 right now, the third baseman for the Houston Astros, a guy that was rumored to be in trade talks between the Astros and Tigers when Miguel Cabrera was maybe a trade candidate being shopped by the Tigers potentially before the season even began. He was rumored to be in trade talks for the Tigers. And what if the Tigers would have gotten their hands on him now, looking back at that possibility that might have been a false trade rumor? But man, he is ready for prime time, for the big dance. He has gotten it done all season long for the Astros, and he got that game-winning hit for the Astros in Game 5. And now they have the chance to win it all in Game 6. And once again, I see the Astros getting it done, even on the road in L.A.
Do you think the storyline will be how Dave Roberts messed up the pitching rotation when he took out Rich Hill in Game 2 after only 4 innings? Because of that fact, you've seen now the LA Dodgers bullpen has been taxed, and the Astros come in with Justin Verlander, and I feel like they're coming into Game 6 and 7 with a much better pitching situation. I feel like Dave Roberts potentially has gassed out his bullpen, and I believe they have a reliever who's come in like 4 straight games and hasn't done well in any of them.
Brendan Morrow. Yep, who's been a starting pitcher. So once again, you pitch him in 3 straight games. He's been a starting pitcher before. He's not lengthened to that degree in that many consecutive games. So he wasn't used to that and got bombed, absolutely rocked in Game 5. But who didn't get rocked in Game 5? Even Clayton Kershaw got rocked in Game 5. Nobody saw that coming. As you said earlier in the podcast, Doc, you thought when he got that lead, he had that lead, Clayton Kershaw was going to lock it down for the Dodgers. He's their ace. He's supposed to. His failure to lock it down in Game 5 might be the reason why the Dodgers lose this series. And all of a sudden, the Dodgers bullpen has failed them. That's been the biggest key to the Astros' success, has been the fact the Dodgers bullpen, the great bullpen with all those consecutive innings of no hits, no runs in the postseason this year. Now the Dodgers bullpen is a bullpen that's allowing runs all of a sudden. It's become leaky. And the Dodgers have their backs against the wall because of the leakiness that we've seen the bullpen has become, has allowed itself to become. So the Astros definitely have the advantage. And the Dodgers, both teams have really used all of their pitchers, have really taxed their respective bullpens through the first 5 games of this series too.
So do you think the balls are juiced something is going on, because the rate at which home runs have been hit this year have been outstanding across Major League Baseball, statistically significant. I mean, the record was broken, right? The most home runs over the course of 162 games across all the teams in Major League Baseball, the record was broken. And you now look at what's going on in the World Series. The most home runs ever collectively combined with two ball clubs has been shattered. And it's unbelievable the rate at which the ball is flying out of the ballpark. One, do you like it? And two, do you think something sinister is going on?
Well, JV and all the pitchers think the ball's juiced because they're getting shellacked with home run balls that they're allowing at a premium rate where they haven't allowed these home runs at such a premium rate in the past. And when your ace and aces collectively in Major League Baseball are saying all this about the ball being juiced, well, then Major League Baseball and Rob Manfred, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, has a problem on his hands, doesn't he? Even though he has failed to admit the fact that the balls could be juiced to this point, well, it darn looks like they have been juiced, or something is going on. And the other thing to bring up, analytically speaking, and these teams' approaches now, well, guess what they are? They are to swing and miss and to swing for the fences. And then if you don't hit a home run, well, typically when you're swinging for the fences, you're going to K and K at a high rate, an astronomically high rate. And that's what's happened with the 30 Major League Baseball clubs in 2017. They have started to hit up and to hit for the fences much more than they have in the past. And that's why you've seen the Ks be up, but also the home run rate. The home run balls hit by these 30 Major League Baseball clubs and throughout this year's postseason be up, and be up big time, Doc. So it might be that more than a problem of Major League Baseball having on its hands with juiced baseballs. It might not be truly juiced baseballs, but the approaches of these teams. And maybe, it's a new analytical approach, right? It's a push to swing more for the fences. So it might be more of that than what these pitchers such as JV are spewing to the masses, that the balls have been juiced.
Do you like this World Series? Have you enjoyed the competitive nature? Do you think, some people are saying, based upon the drama, based upon both teams coming back and forth, all the home runs, no team really being significantly out of it, that this is one of the better World Series out there in terms of all-time performances?
Well, for me, I'm only 24, so I'm still a young spring chicken, unlike yourself, right, Doc? No offense. But for me, yeah, I haven't seen much better than this.
What about last year's? How does it compare to last year's World Series between the Indians and Cubs?
Well, that was great. It went to Game 7, and because the Cubs had that long drought, 108 years of not winning it all. So seeing the Cubs win it and win it in that Game 7 fashion, yeah, whenever a series goes the distance, you want to see that happen, definitely. And you see two of the best ball clubs last year, the two best teams, Astros 100-plus wins, the Dodgers 100-plus wins, all the talent and star power in their respective lineups, in their rotations, in their deep, especially the Dodgers bullpen, deep bullpens too. Astros not as deep, obviously, but you see the analytical approaches now too taken by these teams, and they're taking over the World Series, and that's why then you become disgruntled as a Tigers fan when you see them hire Ron Gardenhire to be their skipper, even though maybe analytics got in the way of Dave Roberts when he pulled Rich Hill prematurely, which cost the Dodgers. You brought that up earlier in this podcast, where maybe analytics have become too much of the game and how these managers approach each game, and in the Fall Classic, maybe you have to fault analytics a little bit. But you see a ton of guys now being hired, these new young mind, bright minds that are analytically driven, such as Alex Cora with the Red Sox. The Yankees' next hire, they say, is going to be an analytically driven guy. And the Phillies, who did they hire? Gabe Kapler, former Detroit Tiger great. Not really, but he played for the Tigers at one point. A guy that was a director of player development with the LA Dodgers. We had spoken, remember, we spoke about him before, about him being a Tigers candidate. We never really believed that he was truly one. The Phillies now go and hire Kapler, and he has this fitness blog he has kept up for a while. And Dan Patrick earlier this week was talking about how on his blog he had at one point had spoken about the fact that if you expose your genitals, your
stuff,
crotchular area, that you can actually enhance this or that physically. And I don't know about ball players doing it to become better ball players, but there's something.
What do you mean expose it? Like,
there's an article on his blog that was written in the past by Gabe Kapler about how you expose your ball sack to sunlight and you benefit somehow, some way. We got to read about it. I don't know the piece of what it exactly tells, but you can read the piece. Okay, it's been written by Gabe Kapler, was on his blog. I think you can still read it. It was on his blog at one point at least, and it's about that very matter. And he's the new manager of the Philadelphia Phillies.
Vito, I mean, the common term, if you want to say it in a broadcast fashion, is nuts. So if a guy,
yeah,
I mean,
it's not the scientific term. I know that.
I've seen you try and him and haw around it, and you're like, oh, the nutsack, but that. No, Vito.
That's how you call it.
If a guy exposes his nuts to the sun, that it has benefits for himself, huh?
Apparently, according to this fitness expert, Gabe Kapler, the new Philadelphia Phillies manager. But to my point, all these analytical minds, totally off the point with that. But now back on track, all these analytical minds are being hired to be skippers of Major League Baseball clubs, even if they don't have prior coaching experience, which is the case with Gabe Kapler. No managerial experience whatsoever, obviously, with that being said. And he's the new Phillies manager, so they're given chances. These Major League Ball clubs in general, and well, to a large degree, are giving chances to guys without prior coaching experience to be their big league skippers. And the Tigers tried out that route with Brad Ausmus. It failed, and that's why we all believe, I think, that they went in a different direction completely and hired Ron Gardenhire, who might not even know what a podcast is, like we've talked about, or what analytics truly are and how you apply them to a team and to your lineup construction and your pitching staff and your bullpen management throughout a 162-game regular season. So we have that now, where teams are going in that direction big time. But you see, once again, back to my original point, too, about Dave Roberts, where it might have cost Dave Roberts and the Dodgers by pulling Rich Hill prematurely because of the usage of analytics, Doc.
Okay, let's take our first time out. We'll come back. I know you definitely want to talk about some solid pitchers and some scary batters out there across Major League Baseball. I know you're definitely fascinated by some of the power arms and some of the huge bats that are out there right now, and I definitely want to get your sense of who are some of the future up-and-coming players. And we have to talk about the legacy of Gene Lamont, has been here since 2005, 2006, and has been let go. This week will be the first week he has not been employed with the Detroit Tigers in several seasons, so I want to get your sense of the Gene Lamont right after this.
And Doc, the Detroit Sports Commission is one of our fine sponsors, and has been now for a while. And guess what? Since 2001, the Detroit Sports Commission has applied its expert touch to marketing and to selling the Metro Detroit area as a marquee destination for regional, national, and international amateur sporting events. And through the Detroit Sports Commission's help, these events have attracted thousands of visitors and pumped millions of dollars into our local economy. It is why Detroit is now not only the place where champions are made, but also the place where championships are played. To find out more about the Detroit Sports Commission and all of the events they are bringing to our very region, Doc, follow the DSC on Twitter and on Instagram at DET Sports, and make sure to check out their fine website at DetroitSports.org. And back here on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company, we have to dive at least a little bit into the legacy of Gene Lamont. Gino, the old man, and he wore out his welcome, you could say. I mean, I don't think people really liked him towards the end, honestly. He was a third base coach at first. Remember that with the Tigers. He had the green light a little bit too much there as a third base coach with the Tigers, became the bench coach with Brad Ausmus there from 2014 on. And, I mean, it's hard to evaluate a guy that's a third base coach and even the bench coach. You can't argue and really totally make the point that a guy like that in that role is a complete failure. We place that kind of blame and that kind of attitude and that kind of language when we talk about a manager and what he has done. So Lamont, we just know that not everybody liked them tremendously. And I would say for a large portion of his tenure with the Tigers, and now I think we're to a point, or we wanted to get to a point, but we haven't totally reached it, where we wanted to establish no country for old men. And we thought maybe we were getting to that point, getting rid of Lamont now, finally, after all these years that he's been on the job with the Tigers in some capacity or another. But now we're back to Gardenhire, and we're not totally out of that realm that the Tigers have really been a part of, which is being like a country club for old men. I know the Tigers coaching staff has been termed as that at one point or another, too.
Vito, I know that you show a complete lack of respect for Gene Lamont, but you got to remember, he was affiliated with the Tigers for 2 World Series appearances.
Yep.
Now, there wasn't great success. I believe just 1 victory across 2 World Series. But at the same time, there has to be some weight and value given to familiarity. Okay, so let's say, for example, I get an opportunity maybe outside of the podcast. Of course, I'm going to look to bring you or other guys along with me because I have familiarity with you. You can give me additional insights. You can tell me, look at this, look at that in the journalistic realm. So I don't believe Jim Leyland would have had the same level of success with the Tigers without Gene Lamont. So give him credit. Yeah, 12 seasons is a long time, but I feel like they parted ways amicably. I mean, you give somebody 12 seasons in your organization, that's usually more than enough. I mean, look, the Yankees won a World Series with Joe Girardi, and they said, look, after 10 years, it's time. I think that's around the number. If you're successful and you win multiple championships, then you can get into decades and you can stay at an organization for long periods of time. But let's say, for example, basketball, baseball, football, I feel like 10 years is quite a long time, and most head coaches and managers don't get that. Look, even Mike Babcock with the Detroit Red Wings was here for almost the better part of a decade, and they even let him go. So there is something to be said about getting that fresh voice, that new person in there. But for Gene Lamont, getting 12 years with the Tigers, let's give him credit. I think he did bring quite a bit to the table, maybe not as much as you would have liked in the last 5 years. I do believe that potentially he did teach Brad Ausmus something. Now, did he apply it properly? Probably not, but I do think that Brad Ausmus, if he does get another opportunity, he might be thankful that he had a chance to sit next to Gene Lamont. I mean, you can't
a
just
stinky old man.
Oh, Vito, come on.
Old school principles, teaching lessons. Up Gene Lamont, maybe. No, not to totally trash him and, totally rid him of all kind of credibility. And we don't want to damage his reputation here, right? We don't want to do that to him. We don't want to damage an old man's reputation. We got to respect our elders, and I'm trying to do that too, okay? Respectfully talk about Gene Lamont, a guy that hasn't always been held in high acclaim, right, from Tigers fans, including myself, and because of his third base waving in runner's ways when he would do that a little bit too often and get guys thrown out. Maybe not at a premium rate, but it seemed like for a while there, he had a bad mark, a bad percentage when it came to getting guys thrown out, as in the percentage of guys getting thrown out that he waved in was a little bit too high for a while there when he was a third base coach under Jim Leyland for Leyland and his staff when Leyland was the skipper of the Tigers. And then being the bench coach, he served in that role for Brad Ausmus, teaching him a few things, but what the heck did he really teach him when you look at Brad Ausmus and almost the, not complete, but almost complete failure that Ausmus had as skipper with the Tigers from 2014 to 2017. And it was time to move on from the old man, a man that we respect as our elder here. He's your elder too, Doc. You're not that old, so we got to respect him. But yeah, it was time to move on. You probably need a fresh voice in the Tigers clubhouse. And I don't even know what he really added towards the end of his tenure too as bench coach with the Tigers. Okay, so you texted me. I know that in terms of the World Series, you have the strong pitching on the Dodgers side. Clayton Kershaw, Yu Darvish. Houston has Keuchel and Justin Verlander, McCullers. And so I know you're fascinated by the big arms and the big bats with all the home runs. And so I know you're fascinated regarding some young up-and-coming talent. You had asked, I'm curious, who's the most feared batter in Major League Baseball, and who is the arm that brings fear across Major League Baseball? My two, I don't want to go up against Justin Verlander with a renewed slider. That's pretty nasty. I mean, when somebody has the ability to dial it up from 93 to 99, that's unbelievable ability with the fastball, and then you mix in a quality slider, a quality out pitch. My goodness, Vito, Justin Verlander with a reliable slider is almost unhittable, and he's had multiple great performances this postseason. So he's an arm I don't want to face. I don't want to face Clayton Kershaw. I don't want to face, an individual like a Michael Fulmer. Somebody that has a superpower arm that can blow you away is a pitcher I don't want to face. And if you ask me who's the most feared bat right now, it's just the man with the biggest stature. I feel like Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton have the ability to break the long-standing home run mark set by Barry Bonds. So you're a man that likes size when it comes to ball players. You like the big bats, literally the big men that use those baseball bats, because you like Aaron Judge, you like Giancarlo Stanton, who might be traded by new ownership led by Derek Jeter in Miami because they want to cut payroll and cut payroll deeply. I'm going to say a guy with a much smaller stature, one of the smallest statures in all of baseball. So going from those tall, huge men to Jose Altuve, the starting second baseman of the Houston Astros. He comes with the big bat. He swings that big bat, and he's effective, can hit it out of the ballpark. I'm almost most fearful of him because he can hit it all over the baseball diamond. He can hit for average, get on base, and he can hit for power once again, hit for that extra base power specifically, and the ball can leave the ballpark when he connects. So we've seen him do it in this fall classic. Doc. So I like him for being the scariest batter in all of baseball. Right now, the guy that should win the American League Most Valuable Player Award as well. And I think he's backed it up with his performance in the postseason, even though those awards are voted on before the start of the playoffs, and they should be. Now, scariest arm to face? Why not JV, the guy that the Dodgers have to face in Game 6, a guy you don't want to face in a must-win situation in the postseason, even in the World Series. Now, I think JV has kind of, has garnered now a status where he's even unhittable to a certain extent in the World Series, which he wasn't with the Tigers, remember, in 06, in 2012. And JV, really quick, he has found that slider, is pitching it even more effectively. Believe had 9 strikeouts using that slider against the Yankees in Game 2 in the ALCS when he was nearly a guy that threw a no-hitter. He had no-hit stuff in that performance, remember, in Game 2 of the ALCS against the New York Yankees. So he's found even more success. He has, I think, even a better and bigger arsenal now. So why would any team in their right mind want to face Justin Verlander? And that's why I think he's the scariest pitcher.
Okay. Who's the most feared Detroit Tiger batter outside of Miguel Cabrera? Is it Nick Castellanos?
Well, you, sir, are pathetic. Damn you!
It might be. It very well might be right now. God, I mean, is that belief when you look at the Tigers lineup? I think we have to be serious. It's sad but true. The Tigers lineup, as it's currently structured, Miguel Cabrera used to be the guy that you feared and was the scariest hitter to face for an opposing pitcher in baseball. Guess what? He's like way down on the totem pole now, isn't he? And Nick Castellanos is rising rapidly, almost, you could say, at least slowly but surely. And with that Tigers lineup, how it's constructed, you could argue it's Nick Castellanos at this point. And that's scary to say. We're recording this on Halloween. It's scary. That's one of the scariest things to admit as a Tigers fan, right? And as a pundit, Doc, is that Nick Castellanos is really the most feared, I think, Tigers hitter right now.
All right. Very enjoyable podcast. I hope we get a chance to see Justin Verlander really perform because, Kate Upton's going to be there. He's going to have a strong contingent of support, and I hope that Justin Verlander, it would be storybook if you wrote it that way. You go from the last place Tigers to, the Houston Astros, and you take down your first World Series in front of, all of Kate Upton's friends and things like that. So it'll be unbelievable to see if it happens, and, it'll be nice. Definitely take some snaps of you crying if Justin Verlander goes complete game, if he has a quality performance and he's the last guy on the mound, definitely take some pictures of you crying. We'll share it.
That might be scare-tastic, too. Me crying, and I'm 24 years old.
Well, it's okay, though, Vito. Justin Verlander, we do have an emotional tie here in Detroit.
So, really quick, we would have him then, if he wins, I think, it would cement his legacy. I think he would be he's a borderline Hall of Famer. You could argue, Doc, that he would be a Hall of Famer. Right? I think you could argue that if he does win in Game 6 and has a very close to masterful-esque performance where he goes 7 or 8 innings and pretty much shuts down the LA Dodgers. And to the extent of where he allows less than 3 earned runs, once again, as I said earlier in the podcast, as I expect him to perform in that manner. And then if he allows under 5 hits and under 3 earned runs and strikes out 8 or 9 LA Dodgers batters, you could argue that's the masterful performance, that everybody wants to see him show. I think that all Tigers fans want to see him show and all Houston Astros fans want to see him show and display on that big stage in Game 6. And it would cement his legacy pretty much. It really would as a Hall of Fame starting pitcher, Doc.
Always enjoy the opportunity to talk some baseball with you. What will make up the content, the meat of the podcast in the coming weeks?
Well, we got to talk about, too, Chris Bosio being hired by the Tigers, the former Cubs pitching coach, right, to be the Tigers' next pitching coach. Ron Gardenhire went in that direction instead of hiring his former pitching coach with the Minnesota Twins, and that man's name is Rick Anderson. But he's a new bullpen coach of the Tigers. So we got to talk about Rick Anderson being hired, Chris Bosio. Who else will fill out the Tigers coaching staff under Ron Gardenhire? And we might have a Tiger of the past be a guest on Tigers Talk in the near future as well.
Great guest. No time off in the offseason. We'll enjoy continuing to talk Detroit Tigers baseball, the premier destination for Detroit sports podcasts. And Vito definitely brings it in terms of baseball podcast. Each and every week, no breaks. DetroitSportsPodcast.com. That's why it makes us the leaders in Detroit sports podcasting.
And Doc, remember to follow the Detroit Sports Podcast Network at Detroit Podcast on Twitter and follow yours truly at Vito Jerome. Adios.